Good day. I've been using the Canon R6 Mark II and the Lumix S5II side by side on a variety of jobs and projects for almost a year now. And today I would like to share my experience and thoughts with you, just in case you are trying to decide which of these two cameras is a better choice for you. Let's start with the handling. Both of them have deep enough grips that allow to hold them comfortably, even if you have big hands. However, when using long lenses like the 70-200, I actually prefer the Canon, especially in winter when I'm wearing gloves. The Canon just feels more secure in the hand. What makes the difference is a small rubber part under the SD card slot. On the Lumix, this part is smooth, which causes the palm to slide slightly. By the way, the Sony A7R5, which has similar square design to the Lumix S5II, feels grippier, and it's because this SD card door is covered with the grippy rubber. Another thing that I prefer on the Canon is the joystick, which is used to move AF point. It is more responsive than the joystick on the Lumix. What I love on the Lumix, though, is how easy it is to customize different buttons on the body. All you have to do is just to press and hold until the menu opens up, and you can choose and assign specific feature. Very helpful. When it comes to battery life, the Canon's battery tends to last longer on my shoots, but it isn't a dramatic difference. Let's talk photography. Both cameras have 24 megapixel sensor, which is perfect for weddings and events. However, the Lumix S5II has a high-resolution mode, which can now be used handheld and produce the detailed 96 megapixel files. Using this high-resolution mode still produces a better result when you put it on a tripod, but that is a topic for a different video. Anyway, the high-resolution mode makes this camera a better choice for landscape photography or architectural photography. Another big plus for the Lumix S5II is focus bracketing feature, which allows the use of mechanical shutter and thus flashlight in macro product photography. The Canon also have focus bracketing feature as well as in-camera focus stacking, but it is done with electronic shutter, which doesn't support use of strobes or flashes. By the way, a little side note here: to do flash focus bracketing with the Lumix, you need strobes with fast recycling time, and you will need to play with the shutter delay, as it doesn't have direct way to control the intervals between shots. While with the Canon, it's not possible at all, and you have to use constant light if you want to use this feature in a macro product photography environment. When it comes to autofocus continuous and frames per second, Canon is a much better choice. The autofocus is fast and tracking reliable. In a situation like this, when a dog is running towards me, as you can see for yourself, the Canon autofocus is very reliable. Most of the pictures are in focus, and to be honest, it is nearly impossible to take a sequence of pictures like this with the Lumix. Yes, I know that many YouTubers are praising the autofocus on the Lumix S5II, which, when compared to older Lumix camera, is noticeable improvement, but it just isn't the case when you compare it to other brands like the Canon or Sony. If I had to compare the autofocus on this camera to some other brand, that would be Nikon Z6 from 2018. Another point for the Canon is that it works flawlessly with my Godox flashes and strobes, which I am using in my studio. For some reason, the Lumix just doesn't play nice with the Godox system. There are slight delays when triggered, the focal length on the flash head doesn't match the focal length of the lens. It's just, in general, it's not as reliable or it's not as responsive. I have used the Godox system with Nikons, Canons and Sony, but only Lumix gives me trouble. I mean, it is usable, but it's irritating. I read that Westcott is a good lighting system for Lumix, but it isn't sold here in Japan, so I can't try it on or recommend it. Alright, let's go back to the sensors for a while. The Canon has optical low-pass filter and the Lumix doesn't have it. It can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what kind of photography you do. The lack of OLPF produces sharper and more detailed images, again great for landscapes or product photography. But those images are also more prone to moire. So if you are photographing things which have repetitive patterns, or people at the wedding where the moire can show on their clothes, choosing the Canon with the optical low-pass filter might be a better option. And yes, I have experienced moire in my wedding pictures and in my wedding videos or in real estate videos with the Lumix, and it is pain in the butt to deal with. To get around it in, for example, architecture photography, I use the Lumix high resolution mode and f/16 or f/12 aperture. The diffraction of the lens helps to mitigate moire effect in many cases. Also, there are tools in Lightroom or Capture One which can deal with this problem, but it is just another step and it adds to your workflow. It's a bigger problem when it comes to video though. Dealing with moire in video, it's much more difficult and cumbersome. When I notice moire showing on my monitor, I just switch to Canon, which handles it much better. By the way, if you are using just the camera's screen, often you are not able to spot the moire problem until you are sitting in front of your computer when it's too late. So I recommend using a larger external monitor, which helps you to spot it at the shoot and deal with it while you are shooting and not when you are sitting in front of your computer. Okay, let's talk about video now. Both cameras have good tools when it comes to exposing footage. Lumix always was ahead of competition when it came to video-centric features on their cameras. The waveform and luminance spot meter on the S5II are great and very useful. But Canon is not sludge either. The implementation of false colors, which I have assigned to asterisk buttons for asterisk button for... Did I just say asterisk bottom? I have assigned it to asterisk button for fast access. And this feature alone puts it ahead of, let's say, Canon R5, which doesn't have this function. So both the Lumix S5II and the Canon R6 Mark II get points here. They are also comparable when it comes to using high ISO in both video and photography. I wouldn't say that one is much better than the other. But here the similarities end, and Lumix is clearly pulling ahead when it comes to shooting video. The shutter angle, auto white balance lock, variable frame rates, MOV format, internal 6K open gate, full HDMI port. I hate the micro HDMI on the Canon. Lumix also have higher dynamic range and V-Log, which I just love. It's so much better than the Canon's C-Log 3. Overall, it's just much better camera for filmmaking. So, how about the Canon? Does it get any extra points for video? Well, yes, it does. Just like in photography, I find the autofocus to be much better and much more reliable than the autofocus on the Lumix. It also has some nice features like face-only autofocus, Canon that is, which can be found in higher grade cinema cameras like the Canon S5II. The autofocus in Lumix is very chaotic when there is more than one subject in the frame. I experienced it at the wedding when the autofocus suddenly started jumping between the bride, the groom and the priest, and it kept jumping and there was no way to assign it to one specific person. Since then, I'm only using the Area Plus autofocus, which gets the job done, but it isn't nearly as good as the autofocus on Canon R6 Mark II. By the way, I am aware that in Lumix S5 Mark I and the Micro Four Thirds cameras, you have to press and hold to confirm the subject so it continues to focus on, but it just isn't working with the new hybrid phase detect autofocus on Lumix S5II. At least not with the current firmware, which is version 2.2. Canon also gets point for faster sensor readout and less rolling shutter in both video and photography. Let's not forget that the Canon can record full frame 60 frames per second, while the Lumix records 60 frames per second with 1.5 crop. It is quite important difference between these two cameras. So, what else? Both cameras can record ProRes and ProRes RAW, but you have to pay additional fee if you want to record ProRes RAW with the Lumix S5II. Yes, the S5IIX has this option already enabled, so you don't have to pay extra for that. Since we are talking about money, the Lumix is cheaper camera and cheaper system overall. Getting into RF mount will definitely be more expensive. If you are on a budget and getting the Lumix is a better option as long as you are not shooting or recording sports or action. At least not with the current autofocus version. Alright, let's conclude. Which is a better camera? Not overall, because both cameras are strong in different areas, but rather which is a better camera for specific use cases. For weddings and events where I shoot both photos and video, I prefer the Canon. The dynamic range isn't great, but fast and reliable autofocus, false colors and full frame 60p just wins for me here. For sports and running animals, also definitely Canon. The Lumix just doesn't cut it in this area. For studio photography, now I prefer Canon, mostly because of the issues that I'm having with Lumix and my Godox system. If I was using different lights which work well with the Lumix, then the Lumix easily could be my studio camera, especially since, as I mentioned before, it has the focus bracketing with mechanical shutter, which is useful for macro product photography. All right, real estate. For real estate, photo and video, again, I have the problem with Godox lights, which I often use to lighten the rooms. So the Godox lights work better with Canon. And also I don't have to worry about moire, and I can use 60p for full frame 60p for the walkthrough footage. Saying that, the dynamic range in video on the Lumix and the high resolution mode in photography are nice features to have. So both cameras would work well. Let's make it a tie here. If I could get a different lighting system that works well with Lumix, Lumix would be a great camera for real estate photography and video. For documentaries, filmmaking, artistic content or content creation, I think the Lumix S5II or S5IIX is a better choice because of all the video tools these cameras offer, plus the vlog and fantastic dynamic range. If I could only merge those two cameras together, that would be a perfect hybrid camera. But I can't, so I'm using both of these side by side. Not for much longer though. Unfortunately, I have to let go one of these cameras. So to find out which one, please subscribe to my channel and ring the bell, and you'll be notified when this video comes out. Thank you for watching.